Welcome everyone. My name is Michele Tracey Berger and I'm delighted to welcome you here today for a reading from the recent collection called Feminine Rising, Voices of Power and Invisibility, edited by Andrea Fakit and Laura Lilabridge, published by Sinrin Press. This book grew out of a very organic process of wanting to harness women's stories, women's relationships with others and themselves. In a moment, you're going to hear from the people assembled here, the contributors to the anthology, and they're going to read for you today. But I wanted to take a moment and just read a little bit from the editor's introduction so you have a sense of the scope of the book. And Andrea and Laura both have introductions, and I'm just going to read a small part from Andrea's. So she says, a specific event led to the inspiration for this book. I experienced a traumatic event in 2014, another one related to my gender. I felt silenced. Angry, I worked with a West Virginia delegate attempting to pass a bill to protect women in domestic violence situations. As an undergrad, I co-founded the Women's Studies Student Association under Dr. Haddock's advisory. I had a modest list of achievements related to serving or bringing justice to women and girls, and each achievement helped me heal. But this time, I was fed up. I obsessed for a month, wondering where I could put this specific anger. How could I use it to serve women and girls? Service heals. I remembered how growing up, the only time I felt heard, the only time I felt like I mattered was when I was sharing a story. But I felt my voice was too small by itself to liberate me this time. What if, I asked myself, what if I helped women all over the nation, maybe even the world, share their own stories? If I give them a platform, will the giver and receiver of the story be empowered? Yes, what a lofty goal. So she goes on to say, we asked women to tell us what this book would be, and they did. Our questions were broad. We wanted contributors to decide which topics were relevant to their lives and not assign relevance. Our website asked contributors to answer these questions. Are there moments in your life when your femaleness was a source of power or hardship? When does your voice ring its clearest? When have you been silenced? We asked for work from women of all ages, races, nationalities, and religions. The manuscript includes 75 poems and 23 essays. Topics include women's rites of passage, sexuality, birth stories, women as protector, survival of oppression and violence, the female body, gender roles, women in the workplace, ethnicity, and ancestry. And then in Laura's introduction, she says, after talking in the beginning of her introduction about not identifying really as a feminist or with certain women's issues when she was young, how she came through that process and why this book was important to her. So she says, working on this collection allowed me to focus my attention on the female experience, not from an academic, distance perspective, but by listening to female voices in their own words. Some of the essays are humorous, some heartbreaking. Each speaks to an aspect of femininity in an authentic and unique way. Some of the writers have published extensively. For others, this is their first published essay or poem. Placed together in one grouping, their power is unmistakable. So now I turn it over to several of the contributors.
Good evening, I'm Renee Olander, and I am just delighted to be here with everyone and to promote this beautiful anthology, Feminine Rising. And I have two works in it, which actually were written 25 years apart and are very different. And I will start with the most recent, deer torso, stone carved. And this is maybe just 4 or 5 years old. And I wrote it in a PTSD workshop in response to a prompt I was given. So here's deer torso, stone carved. Are you still there on his porch, smooth-bellied and gleaming in the corner? He remarked often that you were my torso, your lilting breasts my breasts. But how could that be? You're too heavy to lift, legless and armless as a quadriplegic, headless as a corpse. No voice can emerge from your truncated stub of a neck. Your curvaceous stone reaches down past the contours of your taut belly and elegant navel, down to your sensual tufting, suggesting indentation, labial lines, though your vulva's unseen. Of course, you see nothing, eyeless as you are, can't tell that only these pleasing parts, your breasts and sex, are whole, everything else truncated. It always caused me drag that he didn't honor you with a solid stand, a table, or even a cinder block underneath, the least one might do for one so amputated, whose undeniable beauty sunk just below dick level, a veritable bonsai next to his strapping 6'6". But I never said, didn't speak up on your faceless behalf. Why was that? Or am I misremembering now, after the centuries since you first appeared? In fact, perhaps I asked early on repeatedly about his plans to place something beneath you, something simple and stable, not a pedestal for Pete's sake. And he said I just complained, called me a nag. He could be so insulting and angry, sometimes scary. If you had a tongue, you might ask, how did the porn creep in? It started with a Valentine or two, then videos. Previous girlfriends loved it, he said. Was I to be a prude? I didn't say early on that I could see chafing on the actor's skin, my eyesight better than his, or that I'd read disturbing reports about the industry filled with runaways. Turned out he has a closet full of DVDs, some he proudly declared were female-friendly. He queued up his favorite scenes so they exploded onto the scene as soon as I entered his apartment, and then he expected me to perform. So awkward. Then I felt as if I'd be a hypocrite to speak up and change course. I worried he'd dump me. Good grief. Sure, we had chemistry, but in hindsight, I can see how his rock stardom and smooth tongue made me dumb. Mom used to say, you can't be a rug if you don't lie down. Regrets abound, dear torso. I wonder now, given climate change, sea level rise, and such a bitter winter, are you still out there, so vulnerable, as if struggling for a little dignity? If I had to do it over, I'd figure some way to smuggle you away when he wasn't paying attention, which of course was most of the time. I'd give you shelter, do my best at love and respect, but it's too late. I'll just have to do better by other sisters in the future. Sincerely, his ancient, recent romance. I meant to say also that I can be found, that my most recent collection, American Dangerous, both of these works are in this, and I can be found on Amazon or at Backlash Press, which is based in East Sussex, England, which produced American Dangerous, or on Facebook. The Apparatus of the Dark. This poem is inspired partly by the great Emily Dickinson's little poem that begins, "The lightning is a yellow fork from tables in the sky by inadvertent fingers dropped." I won't tell you the whole thing. It has a little epigraph, notes to myself on longevity after a lightning storm on the beach. 1. You can touch, Mama said. She placed my palm on her stretched skin. She pulled my head close so I heard, a child. I squelched my urge to recoil from ripe motion there in my mother. I searched for the door. She said doctors would open. Afterward, after prayers with her, I lay in the night straining for a sense of origin, a point like a faraway star I came from. 2. Imagine atoms and clusters of cells driven to grow like banks of clouds. 3. My mother conceived 7 lives. 5 survived, 1 miscarried, 1 died a few hours after birth. Mama buried a life alone, and Dad sailed home from Korea. Next, I slid, premature, twice declared dead, packed in ice till I shrieked my lungs alive. 4. Mama's body burned. Her ashes went to sea. Our last touch, my lips brushed her forehead, cool as shaded clay. 5. This evening I went out for broken silver, beyond sailing scuds at dusk and high tide. Bitter air came from somewhere, something tossed up inadvertent. Soon I'll burrow in bed and seek childhood dreams where palm fronds were God's fingers touching down. I'll study markings, sacred, scared, how moon rims dip past sight. Thank you.
That was great, Renee. Hello, my name is Jamie Wendt. I'm in Chicago. I'm an English teacher at a high school, and I have 2 kids, and I'm a poet. So my first book, Fruit of the Earth, was published in 2018, and the poem that's in the anthology Feminine Rising is also in my book. So I'll read that poem first from the anthology. And then I might read a poem or 2 from Fruit of the Earth. All my poetry, for the most part, is about like Jewish traditions and Jewish rituals, you know, within the lens of womanhood and motherhood. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. So let's see, the first poem, or the poem that I'll read from the anthology, is called Pins, Ropes, and Wooden Stakes. You can tell a lot about a mother by her clothesline. Dirtied rope splitting like Havdalah candles. Designer shirts appearing each month like a full moon. The dye shining a midnight river. You can tell a lot about a mother by counting the days she lets dry clothing dance. How many stains cover bibs after scrubbing. The number of patches on pants and socks. The way she stands between the rope lines, feeling the slap of wet cotton on her tired body. Once the children have grown, she will remember unclipping her son's starched collared shirts, crunching like the opening of his prayer book for the first time all year. Her old wedding dress rippling under pins like an ordinary nightgown, restless, from having also brushed her daughter's virgin ankles, a rebel in the wind, an heirloom in chains. Her black lace bras snap against the rope with more fury than thieving crows. That's the poem from the anthology. And then I think I'll read just maybe 2 short poems from Fruit of the Earth. This book, again, was published in 2018 by Main Street Rag. So you can find it on their website, or my website is jamiewent.wordpress.com. So you can find my writing on there. I also write a lot of book reviews and some essays. So that's on my website as well. So I'll read a poem called The Sparrows, which is about my grandmother's death. She died when I was 13, and she was like the first person who I loved to die, and her death had a big impact on me. So this is The Sparrows. We prepared the burial at the kitchen table, chalk in our throats with fresh honey. Shrouds without pockets fell from the rabbi's lips, white fabric starched, a bath for the body, scentless soaps. Mom scribbled on paper illegible curves, rushing from her hand, pencil lead rubbed like winter clouds, a blur of something to do instead of cry. A holocaust of words, she wrote and wrote what he said, would not stop her dictations when sparrows from a ketubah came to life on the canvas on the wall. Flew around the kitchen in circles, hovering over Mom, the great-grandchildren Amma would not know. The rabbi remained focused on his to-dos, as if the birds escaping their frame were normal. Little white shrouds on a kitchen table, nothing out of the ordinary. Like a mother writing the wrong way on lined paper in the middle of the afternoon that was evening gray and cold. Anticipating the entrance of Elijah, his saving, the saving from ourselves, our need. And then I'll just read one more from Fruit of the Earth. This poem is called To Emma Lazarus. She's one of my favorite poets, most famous for the New Colossus, which is on the Statue of Liberty, which is about welcoming immigrants. So this poem, actually, I took a lot of lines from the New Colossus, or phrases, and if you were looking at the poem, you'd see them in italics, but they're kind of incorporated within here. Emma Lazarus was Jewish, and she wrote a lot about welcoming immigrants, specifically who were fleeing Russia from the pogroms at the time that she was writing, which is my family's history. So that's kind of incorporated in here. To Emma Lazarus. Being Jewish at the hook of the 20th century was wretched refuse, homeless. Or were you just referring to their gray, sunken eyes, the spoons they carried to eat the earth, to prosper and forget? Liberty's tough face never smiled above that scrunched sleeve. You know that Miriam and her women sang just as loud, as strong, as tired, as poor as your poetic huddled masses, their bodies the same boxed luggage. But you were wrong about the golden door. Family names were altered, then forgotten. As the colossal door slammed shut, the sounds of Yiddish, of names past. Your mother of exiles, more like Rhodes or a Greek goddess than you admit, is everything gold and calf they were commanded not to bow down to, standing idly by, mild-eyed, like God during a pogrom. This patriotic woman does not even pretend to kiss the sky, to offer a penny. Her eyes scratched by hail and rain, unknowing, indifferent, like the land. Thank you.
Kia ora, I'm Siobhan Harvey. I'm a displaced writer living in New Zealand, Aotearoa. I just wanted to take a moment to say how humbled I am to be reading alongside Michele, Renee and Jamie. You can find me in Cloud Boy, which is published by Otago University Press, and it won the Kathleen Grattan Award for Poetry, which is New Zealand's richest poetry prize, and it talks about the journey of a mother and her son through autism and his first years into school and education. You can also find me on the Poetry Archive, and also I've had some creative non-fictions recently published in the Griffith Review and so forth. It's an amazing anthology of work, and I'm just honoured to find myself and my work in here. So I'm going to read from When My Best Friend Came to Stay, or Corporeal Minimalism, composition in 12 parts, inspired by Philip Glass. There is no sincerer love than the love of food, George Bernard Shaw. 1. After my best friend disappeared, my counsellor asked me to describe her. Thin, I said. My reflection stained the window. Outside, beyond my ghostly image, strangers crammed in red London buses idly stared out of foggy glass. Strangers on foot bustled through the city, moving shadows across department store windows. The counsellor noticed my inattention. She looked up from her notebook, caught my eye, inquired, "Did your best friend have a name or distinguishing features?" Thin, I replied. Thin. 2. An early spring morning, 1987. I was 14 years old. The sun was a shard cut between grey cloud. Frost pricked earth and air. I changed into my sports clothing for my first class gym. When I ran onto the field, a girl from a remedial class, Billy Harper, pointed at me and brayed, "Fat features." Like many caught on the cusp of puberty, I carried puppy fat on my jowls and cheeks. It's towards this commonplace misfortune that Billy directed her cruel intent. Girls peeked at her, huddled and gossiping. They could have joined in. They could have cackled and finger-pointed and sneered, but they chose not to. Perhaps they were tired, bored, or simply aware that Billy's jibe was weak. After all, it carried little of the bile and barb prepubescent children traditionally throw at each other, such as dumb, weirdo. And yet, my best friend, hidden perhaps behind a slight trunked poplar nearby, witnessed the slur, felt my jag of pain, and knew she could offer me her secret companionship and solace. 3. The day after Billy's taunt, my best friend arrived on my doorstep. I was in the kitchen alone, cooking boiled potatoes, tinned carrots, and fish fingers for my absent family. There was something about the kitchen, its steam, fire, and stricture, and about the abandonment of my chore. Father asleep upstairs, mother working all day, and my 12-year-old sister, Sarah, supposedly playing Cabbage Patch Kids at a friend's house, though later it would transpire that she and a friend were smoking, experimenting with makeup, and poring over posters of Wet, Wet, Wet Smarty Pello. Yes, there was something about all this that made me invite my best friend to move in. It's strange how my best friend travelled so light. No suitcases, no clothing, no possessions whatsoever, like an angel of abstinence personified. Each day thereafter, my best friend and I walked to school together, sat side by side in class, and then trekked home. We communicated all the time. Our favourite topic was food. 100 grams of apple has 47.5 calories, I told her. That's as much as 10 grams of cheese. She knew, of course. She was an authority on how many calories every item of food possesses. So at lunchtimes, while we walked around the yard, me nibbling on a wafer of cheese or morsel of apple, we counted how little we'd eaten and took pride in discovering who'd consumed the least amount of food. Naturally, my best friend always won this contest, but increasingly, I ran a close second. 4. On Sundays, while our neighbours were at church, Mother washed, scrubbed, and brushed our uncarpeted tenement. As she worked, a chicken roasted in the oven, and the carpenters sung on the stereo, close to you, now and then, a kind of hush passage. Mother owned them all. Sometimes as Karen Carpenter's sombre voice undercut her brother Richard's cheery lyrics and piano, Mother, on knees before the black grate, paused over ashes accrued from a week's worth of blazes, then burst into tears. 5. Father kept different habits from us. Every morning his face haggard, his eyes bagged, a dust of metal upon him. He arrived home from turning a lathe just as Mother left for her job. My sister Sarah, my best friend, and I headed for school. This routine shaped others. When my best friend and I returned home from school, piles of books, reams of homework, and Sarah in tow, I was laden down with the knowledge that I must prepare Father's lunchbox and flask of tea, reline his shoes with cardboard, make dinner for the family, then awaken Father from his slumber. Later, the dishes washed. Mother came home to a dinner turning hard in the oven. As I poured through revision text, my parents sat silently over a pot of tea. The television broadcasting news of election rivalry, factory closures, and increased unemployment. There was another routine. It began once Father's car lights disappeared from view. Mother sprawled on the sofa, cradling a £1/4 of rock candy, and cried. Always she spoke of her 13 siblings, her jobless father gambling away the housekeeping funds, her jaundiced mother working 4 jobs to support the brood. She mentioned her own top marks in school, her removal from education when she was 15 in order to keep house for her younger brothers and sisters, her escape by marrying father. She talked about how I arrived too soon and about my sister's birth 2 years later, the only child mother planned. All these routines made the house dusty. School clothes and overalls went unwashed. So, with my best friend's silent approval, I stayed up long after mother went to bed. I polished furniture. I washed and ironed clothes. At first, I expected mother, or father even, to notice how the coffee table shined and how their clothes smelled fresh. I yearned for praise, but they carried on as before. It was my parents' blindness that gave my best friend and me our next brilliant idea. Having made the best I could from a tin of marrow-fat peas, a packet of dehydrated mashed potato, and slices of liver, I served the meal to my family, then slipped away to my room. There, my best friend and I delighted in the fact that no one noticed my absence. Namihi, aha.
It's just an honor to read with all of you. So I'm going to read an excerpt from, I'm Michele Tracey Berger, and I'm a speculative fiction writer. So I don't often write creative nonfiction and poetry, but I'm going to read a excerpt from a nonfiction piece called The Poison Our Mothers and Grandmothers Drank. And you can find me, I have a blog called The Practice of Creativity, where I try to support writers and creative professionals about the work of a creative practice. And that's on michelleberger.wordpress.com. 2002, Dream. I'm surrounded by my grandmother, my mother, and other indistinct female figures. They are dressed in ceremonial blue and white tunics, and we are pressed together on the concrete walkway outside the second floor of my Oakland apartment building. I pay attention to my dreams. They are a night rhythm that feeds my waking life. I record them, honor them with titles, and pore through pages of old dream journals as if meeting cherished friends. While visiting an art gallery in Pittsburgh, North Carolina, Sharon Blessam's Medicine Woman photograph brings back a significant dream to me that has taken years to reflect on and absorb. It is so clear in my memory. There is a hush in the dream, and I am given a chalice. My grandmother, whose husky voice is just as commanding in the dream as it was in life, tells me to drink from it. I do not want to drink from it. I know it is poison. I am upset in the dream, and I try to push the chalice away. I search for the precise description of this dream, knowing it is buried somewhere in my 12 journals, which chronicle my move from the West and much of my 8.5 years in North Carolina. After upending my already disorganized office, I find the journal with my first recollection of the dream. And luckily, just a few pages after the entry, I see my notes from the therapy session where I first discussed this dream with Ruth, a skilled Jungian psychotherapist. When I read my entry, however, I'm crestfallen because there's a gap between what I initially wrote about the dream and how the dream exists in my memory. I struggle to make sense of the differences. In the journal entry, it just says dreams, active, grandmother and mom and me drinking witch hazel. Medicinal? What does that do? remember this fragment the best. The detail of witch hazel surprises me. The sharp smell of it has faded from my memory of the dream. Why didn't I remember that witch hazel was what they offered? I know witch hazel well. In my mind's eye, I see the tall bottle's red and black label. My mother used it for everything, just like other poor urban women did in my neighborhood. She sprinkled it on cotton balls and rubbed us down with it for fever or to take the sting out of a bruise, or as an astringent to dry up a pimple. I wonder about the symbolism of witch hazel, as I know it is a significant medicinal plant. Nothing comes to me. Not satisfied with the brevity of the journal entry, I consider if I might have combined this dream with another. No, I tell myself that's not right. This is the written aspect of the dream, a fraternal rather than identical twin to the one that lives in my memory. In the dream, my mother, small, nut brown, and steadfast, says, I must drink this poison. I must drink it even though I feel I will die. A sense of obedience and loyalty washes over me in the dream. I defer to them. My inherent trust in them sustains me as I drink the poison. So I read the entry from the therapy session. Ruth said in the therapy session that I got a trigger about the witch hazel dream and that I was interpreting things too literally, that it's really about the dark feminine, the transmutation of the woundedness of these women that can pull you down into something else by my own psychic witch, old knowledge ritual. It is tough and it is strong medicine. In the dream, I drink the poison and I am dying. I shake and tremble. It is a terrible agony. I, however, was never really fully satisfied with Ruth's interpretation, though I could not come up with a better one at the time. Years pass and my time becomes laser focused on planting roots after this cross-country move, navigating my partner's lonely road of depression, and establishing myself as a published scholar. A little bit later on in the essay, I talk about reflecting on this dream now, many years later. I think of it as an act of offering, and drinking the poison that my grandmother and mother initiated me was really an alchemical process. It was not meant to literally kill me, but to help me to become conscious of the nature of challenges that others and I face. Such recognition unleashes the power of authentic awakening. As I look at my life now and how it's unfolded in North Carolina, I believe that the dream gives me insight into how to help other women, especially women of color, recognize the poisons that they face in their lives: racism, sexism, dispossession of spirit, erasure, poisons that are so eagerly offered to them, to us in society. I support other women to try to transmute society's poisons into a greater transformation of self. The dream also points to healing the unfulfilled karmic desires of female ancestors who came before us, who swallowed that poison and died. They swallowed the poison because they found themselves alone often, afraid constantly, and shamed routinely. They swallowed the poison because anger basted their vital organs, rotting them from the inside out. They swallowed the poison because they had lost touch with their own night rhythms, wise women guides, and nocturnal magic. I try to draw on this knowledge as a guide, midwife, soul treasure hunter, mentor, and witness for my students and clients. The poison does not kill me. I stand shakily and meet the women's eyes. My vessel is stronger than any poison. My luminous body lives. So thank you, everyone. This concludes tonight's program. Please come and visit the Feminine Rising YouTube channel and follow the contributors online. And we will have a series of readings. So there's lots of content on the YouTube channel, and also individual contributors read from their own work. Thank you.